Just double checking. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
My laptop's been playing up, but anyway, it looks like it's doing all right at the minute.
We're giving the people a little prelude now because we're actually live. So
Right.
good evening, everyone. and thank you very much for joining us to celebrate the curlew in our uplands. Now, I'm Kane Scrimger from Wild Intrigue. We're an ecotourism social enterprise based in Northern England. But tonight I'm joined by Christina Taylor, Curlew Life Project Officer for Gelty and Hadrian's Wall, Hilary Maguire, who's the Conservation Advisor for the Forest of Bowland, and Philip Miller, who's the Curlew Project Officer for the Forest of Bowland too. And tonight's all about the curlew. We're here to celebrate the curlew coming back to our uplands in the spring, learn a little bit more, watch some beautiful films, and have a bit of a discussion. So if anybody's got any questions tonight, for anybody involved, please just put them in the chat, so Facebook chat or YouTube chat. And if you don't have access to either of these things, you can send an email to info@wildintrigue.co.uk, and Heather, who's running the tech tonight, will let us all know. Now, curlews at this time of year are going in a bit of a movement, a bit of a migration. Now, we're quite used to seeing these curlews by the coast, so during the winter months, as Christina will probably tell us more, they spend the time in our estuaries, and this is where we hear them, where we see them. But during the summer months, they return to our uplands and other lowland wetland areas to breed. But we've got some amazing winter spectacles of curlews to see, so we can see these curlews all year round. And these are a few clips from Holy Island a couple of years ago. Absolutely stunning part of the world, and all of this, these estuary scenes, transpire all around the UK, where we see a large influx of waders species going to catch or feed on all them different food sources. But tonight, the really main event is the talk from the 3 staff members that I've got here tonight. So Christina Taylor, Hilary Maguire and Philip Miller are going to take you through a talk about the ecology, the habitats and the conservation work built up around the curlews. So I'm going to hand over to Christina to take us through a talk.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you, yeah.
Fantastic. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, we can see it perfect.
Great, lovely. Right. Thank you very much for coming, everyone. My name is Christina Taylor. As Kane says, I'm the Curlew Life Project Officer, and I'm helping to deliver a curlew conservation project along an area of Hadrian's Wall and RSPB Geltsdale. And I'll be handing over to my colleagues Hilary and Philip, who are focusing their work in the Forest of Bowland later in the talk. But we wanted to give you a bit of an overview and an introduction to our curlew species and some other waders that you might see in here. A little bit about their ecology, their habitat needs and their sort of breeding habits. A little bit about their population status, so the numbers of curlews and their distribution around the UK and the world. And then move on to talk a little bit about conservation actions that are being undertaken on their behalf. And then finally, what the wider community and yourselves might be able to do for curlew conservation. So firstly then, a little bit about waders. Curlews belong to a group of birds known as waders, or they're known as shorebirds in America. There's many 213 species of waders worldwide, and they exist in a variety of habitats, depending on the species and the time of year. As the pictures show, they come in a wide variety of shapes and sizes. They're typically associated with wet habitats, hence the name waders, and they're typically long-legged, which allows them to exist in that transition between wet habitat and dry habitat. And a typical difference of waders is their shape and the size of their beak. Or bill. Some are very long, some are very short, upwardly curved or downwardly curved, and this all it means that they can take advantage of different food sources. So this graphic here is a nice one. It shows the different depths of food sources in an estuary habitat, with the curlews there taking advantage of the deeper burrowing food, whilst the ring plover typically will pick their food from on or just below the surface. But here then are our big 5 sort of breeding waders that are typical of our upland farmland habitat. So curlews breed alongside birds such as lapwings and redshanks and snipes and oyster catchers. But a bit more about our curlew then. So its common name is the Eurasian curlew. That's the species that we have here in the UK. Its Latin name or scientific name is Numenius arquota, and both parts of that name are associated with its downwardly curving beak. So Numenius meaning new moon and arquota meaning bow-like. And like a lot of birds, curlews take their common name from the sound or some of the calls that they make. So a curlew has a curly or curlew type call that you might hear during their breeding season, and that's how it gets its name. But in Northumberland and Scotland, it's also known as the warp or the wop, and that's another type of call that you might hear alongside that sort of haunting, bubbling song that curlews typically make. And because of that lovely and haunting and evocative call, curlews are often the stuff of the written word and songs. This quote is a lovely quote from a very, very old poem called The Seafarer. And it's all about a man being alone at sea and taking sort of comfort in the cries of curlews and gannets in the absence of human contact. So how would you recognise the curlew? So they have that distinctive long downward curving bill. They're our largest European wading bird. They have long stilt-like grey legs, and they're quite distinctive in flight. They have like a gliding flight pattern and a distinctive sort of white wedge shape of feathers at the base of their tail. But they're also very well camouflaged, and they can be really difficult to see in long vegetation. As with lots of breeding waders, it can be tricky to tell males and females apart. So unless they're helpfully displayed next to each other, as such as they are in this picture, it can be quite tricky. Females tend to be heavier and their bills are longer, but there's quite a bit of overlap, so it can be tricky to tell them the sexes apart. In terms of their characteristics, they're very faithful to each other, so they tend to breed with the same bird for life, and they're faithful to their breeding sites as well, and they return to the same place to breed every year. Like other waders or seabirds, they're long-lived, so an average lifespan might be 11 years, whilst the record is 32 years. That's a long time. Long-lived bird, and they may reach maturity and breed from the age of 2. So as Kane said, curlews tend to spend the winter along the coastlines of the UK. Our birds, some of our breeding curlews spend the winter in Ireland and France, but we receive an influx of Scandinavian breeding birds, typically during our relatively mild winter. And so the breeding population is around 150,000 birds. But then during the breeding season and the springtime, they return from their wintering grounds to the upland pastures and moorland habitats of northern UK, with the first birds typically being seen or heard during February. They're ground nesting birds, which means that their nest is made in shallow scrapes in the ground, which are lined with vegetation, such as in the picture there. Typically, 4 eggs are laid in a clutch or a brood, and the incubation is undertaken by both parents, but mostly the female. And it takes up to 29 days, so just shy of a month for those eggs to hatch. And so once hatched, as soon as curlew chicks hatch from their eggs, they're what we call precocial young, which means they're very independent. That means that they can move around and they can feed themselves immediately. So they're not fed by their parents, but they're still looked after by their parents until they can fly or fledge. And this process takes about 5 weeks. The care is increasingly given by the male during this time, as the adult female would typically depart once the chicks reach about 3 weeks old. So they very, as these pictures show, take on sort of their adult characteristics as the weeks go by. But during this time, they still remain very vulnerable. So the adults are very much focused on looking after those birds, which is when you might typically see adult curlews becoming very agitated and vocal around that time. So their habitat needs, like all breeding birds, really is a safe place to nest and find cover and places for food or food availability for chicks and for adults. So curlews nest or breed in a variety of upland habitats, be that rough pasture or hay meadows or further up the hill on moorland allotments in bracken and in heather. But what they really like is a good mix of vegetation height. So nice tussocky vegetation, so with denser bits of vegetation where they can provide cover and lay their nests in, alongside shorter vegetation that's nice and damp and muddy, and that gives them a safe place to nest. And those open, more shorter areas of vegetation provide places for chicks and adults to feed in. And chicks, particularly being so small, they can chill and get wet quite easily, and they find dense vegetation quite difficult to move through. So having those shorter areas is really important to them. And the more muddy and wet that they are, the better, because those wet and muddy patches really increase the availability of their invertebrate food. So why are we involved in curlew conservation? Well, put simply, curlews have declined by about 50% in the UK since the mid-1990s, and populations remain unstable. We estimate there's around 68,000 breeding pairs in the UK, and these are mainly now confined to our northern uplands. But those 68,000 breeding pairs represent a quarter of the global population of these species. So we have a responsibility really to help this species. As you can see by the map, the rate of decline has been less severe in England than it has with the other UK countries, with the declines being most severe in Northern Ireland. But nevertheless, in England, curlews have disappeared from many areas of England, particularly in the southern uplands, and so they're now confined really to our northern areas. And the fact that the decline has been so severe here and elsewhere means that they're sort of globally near threatened now, and they're one of our most important or our biggest bird conservation issue really that we're facing, or amongst them anyway. So these two maps sort of kind of show the importance of our England uplands for this bird. So the map on the left shows the density of curlews per kilometre squared. So the darker the colour, the more birds there are in that area, and that clearly shows that the sort of northern uplands as being very important. And the map on the right is sort of like shows a representation of what we call the grassland assemblage in the northeast of England. So the more colours, the more species there are in that particular location. So again, this sort of northern uplands looking very important for that suite of birds that nest and breed alongside curlew. So why have these declines been so severe? So they're sort of generally as a result of policy-driven large-scale changes in land use. So this has led to destruction or fragmentation or reduction in quality of suitable habitat for curlew. This leads to what we call poor breeding success. So often insufficient to maintain sort of the necessary number of chicks per pair per annum to achieve population stability. So typically curlews would need to have one chick every 2 years, survive to adulthood to join the breeding population to keep the population stable. So there are a number of factors associated with that change in land use. So when we talk about agricultural intensification, we might talk about things like things becoming increasingly mechanised, maybe switches from more traditional grassland management to silage production, which means more mechanised and more cutting during the breeding season. There's obviously a focus on increasing woodland cover in the UK, but historical woodland planting has led to the destruction of breeding habitats, so some sort of large forest areas being planted on upland habitats. So there's a direct impact of woodland planting leading to habitat loss, but also the additional effect of woodland is that tree cover can provide cover for generalist predators such as foxes and crows, and all of these factors sort of led to the populations of curlews becoming more vulnerable really to predation, which is now the major cause of poor breeding success. So what are we doing about it? So I'm just going to talk about some of the work that the RSPB is involved in alongside other conservation organisations. So the Curlew Recovery Programme is RSPB's response to the decline of the curlew. So we're delivering this programme with the long-term aim of improving the conservation prospects for curlews, working on both our reserves, but also in partnership with other organisations across the UK, be they farmers or other conservation organisations. And some of this work has received a real boost this year by the Green Recovery Challenge Fund. And this was established by the UK government to kickstart nature recovery, create green jobs and tackle climate change. And one such project to receive this funding was the Curlew Recovery Northern England project, which is a project that Hilary and Philip and I have been delivering for the past year. And this project aimed to support work to halt the decline of breeding curlew in my project area, Geltstone and Hadrian's Wall, and in the Forest of Bowland. And in both these areas, so we worked with others, with farmers to restore land and improve habitat condition for breeding curlew, but also to encourage community involvement from local communities through volunteering and other engagement. And Philip and Hilary will talk about their work in Bowland in a few minutes, but I'll focus on the work that I've been involved in at Geltstone and Hadrian's Wall. And this incorporates an area of upland farm habitat along Hadrian's Wall, where we're also part of a larger and longer project called Curlews in Crisis, or Curlew Life, and that's been funded by the LIFE programme of the European Union. So the Curlew Life project is being delivered across 5 priority landscapes across the UK, so in all of the 4 UK countries. And each of these sites have been identified as having important breeding populations of curlew. And we're delivering this project until the end of 2024. We've been going for a year. This is our 2nd year of work. And this is my project site. So it includes RSPB Geltsdale, shown in red there. This is a large upland reserve consisting of 2 farms and a mosaic of upland habitats, so moorland and rough grassland and grass pasture. And RSPB Geltsdale is a very important element of the project in that we can take others and show them how we are managing the land for curlew and other breeding waders. So it's a really important demonstration site, if you like. But we're also working in a large area that's not part of the reserve, and this is mainly sort of privately owned upland farm habitat that runs along the site of Hadrian's Wall, between sort of the public forest estate to the north, and large parts of it fall within the Northumberland National Park. And some of it is also owned by the National Trust and managed by their tenant farmers. And both of these organisations have been incredibly supportive in terms of putting us in touch with their farming contacts, but also their volunteers. And it really helped sort of kickstart the project last year. And what we're doing then is we're working with those land managers and the local community to improve and expand breeding habitat, but also to raise awareness of curlew conservation issues. And our goal is that we will have enhanced habitat conditions within all of our project sites, which would ultimately lead to stable populations within each of those sites. And a really important part of our programme of work is our monitoring programme. So this monitoring programme tells us how our curlew populations are doing, but it also identifies areas that would benefit from conservation actions and crucially to evaluate responses to those conservation actions. So alongside monitoring our curlew abundance or the numbers of curlews in our project area, we're also looking at breeding success. So how many of those pairs are actually achieving that magic 0.5 productivity threshold. And we're also looking at the habitat condition and sort of monitoring those predators as well. So when we talk to farmers about curlew-friendly management, we talk to them about and encouraging them to maintain that mix of tall and short vegetation in time for the start of breeding season, and then hopefully avoiding mechanical operations during that time, which would might lead to sort of destruction of nests. And then alongside that, removing or if possible reducing the stocking levels, which reduces the risk of nests being trampled by stock. And then alongside that, provision of those lovely wet and muddy areas, which really increase that sort of food availability. And so, like we said, sort of been working with farmers and partner organisations to expand or improve curlew breeding habitat. And we had some funds available through the project to support this work. And some examples of that would be to undertake some vegetation cutting. So the picture at the top shows our work at Geltsdale, sort of cutting back some of the heather, making it less dominant. And so they're providing that nice mix of vegetation heights and densities. And the picture on the right is an area of blanket bog. It's a protected site, and we worked with a contractor to remove some Sitka spruce from nearby forestry that had self-seeded on there. And then the picture at the bottom left shows that area now clear of trees. And then the picture on the left is work we've recently just finished in providing a large water feature or a series of scrapes in a field with lots and lots of sort of nice, wet, muddy edge, which provide nice and shallow shelving areas, which provides that more important food and a nice, safe place for chicks and adults to feed in. So I'm just going to hand over now to Philip and Hilary to talk about their work in the Forest of Bowland.
Hello, so I'm Hilary. I'm a conservation advisor in the Forest of Bowland. So this is an area of outstanding natural beauty, or an AONB, in North Lancashire and North Yorkshire. It's a stronghold for wading birds, including curlew. And although the RSPB don't have a reserve in the Forest of Bowland, we have been working in the area for 40 years. So our work consists of an annual breeding survey of these birds. In 2021, 47 farms were surveyed and 157 pairs of curlew were found to be breeding on these farms. So these are all private farms spread across the area. You can see them marked in green on the map on your screen. So our annual trends show a relatively stable population of adult birds, but this doesn't mean that we can become complacent. There are signs that, in common with the rest of the country, as Christina mentioned, curlew aren't raising enough chicks in order to maintain a stable population. So in Bowland, we've begun to monitor breeding productivity, which is a little bit more difficult than it sounds, but we monitor this closely and we'll continue to do this across Bowland in order to understand the trends and causes of chick mortality. So how do we ensure a future for curlew in Bowland? We engage as many farmers and landowners as possible in curlew conservation, and through advice and monitoring, we encourage them to farm in ways that are sympathetic to breeding curlew. So this includes the actions that Christina mentioned, so leaving wet areas of the farm undrained, reducing the number of grazing livestock during the breeding season, and avoiding field operations during the breeding season. We help farmers access funding, such as countryside stewardship, and this can provide a payment for some of these actions, which in turn helps the farm business to be more sustainable. And we can also help them access things like one-time funding for capital work to improve habitat. And part of this that we've done recently is the Green Recovery Challenge Fund, which Philip will speak more about in a moment. Next slide, please, Christina. So one element that we've covered through the Green Recovery Challenge Fund is a research project into dung invertebrates. So what do dung invertebrates have to do with curlew, you might wonder? Well, the anti-parasite medication that farmers often use on their livestock has been proven time and again to have a significant negative impact on populations of invertebrates, so insects and such, that live in livestock dung. Curlew and other ground nesting waders, such as lapwing in particular, feed on invertebrates that live in these grazed pastures. So we partnered with a local vet clinic to raise awareness of the impact of these medications and to see if there was any discernible effect of anti-parasite management practices on the ability of curlew to successfully raise their chicks. So our findings did indicate, unsurprisingly, that it wasn't a significant factor in comparison to the other factors such as habitat quality and grazing practices. However, we were successfully able to raise awareness of the negative environmental impacts of using these medications unnecessarily and encourage farmers to find alternative practices that are just as good, if not better, for the health of their livestock. So I'll pass it on to Philip next, and it'll be next slide, please, Tina.
Hello. I started in the role as Bowland's Curlew Project Officer just under 12 months ago. So started at the start of the breeding season, started working with farmers to see what habitat improvements we could do on their land. Whilst the birds were breeding, we sort of put plans into place of mainly two different areas, rush management and wet feature creation. As Tina and Hilary were saying, that if you get heavily infested with rush and you lose that open aspect to certain parts of the field, the wading birds don't like nesting there because they can't see predators coming and lose the visibility. So we work to reduce the density of the rush by cutting and to open the fields back up. and also in the introduction of wet features, mainly scrapes, but also putting soil bunds around dikes to retain water back, especially in dry weather, to create them muddy feeding areas for the birds and the chicks. That's what I've been up to for the last 12 months.
Great, thanks, Philip. So I thought we'd just end with looking at how you or the local community and others can help in terms of curlew conservation. So the first thing is you could volunteer. So RSPB is not alone in other organisations. We simply couldn't manage without our volunteers, and we value their contribution enormously. And there's a number of ways to volunteer, not just for the RSPB, but other conservation organisations in your area that are delivering really important action to save nature. The Curlew Life Project is no exception. So apart from supporting the monitoring programme, there'll be opportunities to volunteer directly for the project, for example, through public engagement. Another way to help is to come and enjoy the countryside, but please do so responsibly. A useful website to visit is the UK Government's Countryside Code, which provides advice for countryside visitors. So that's all about going and enjoying in the landscape and the wildlife, but watching from a distance, maybe sticking to footpaths, keeping your dogs on leads. That really helps the wildlife, but also farmers and their livestock during that time. Another way to help is to spread the word. Spread the word about curlews, celebrate curlews. If you're active on social media, keep in touch with our Twitter feed. And also an important day coming up on the 21st of April is World Curlew Day. That's when we really celebrate our curlews. The 21st of April is St. Bueno's Day, which is a patron saint of curlews. So keep in touch and get involved that way. If you are a landowner or a farmer, you could take part in our farmer survey. This really helps us understand about farmers' knowledge and attitudes and what they're up to in terms of their curlew-friendly management. If you're not a land manager or farmer and you know one, then please do encourage them to take part. It doesn't take very long, but it's really, really useful social science survey that we're undertaking at the moment. You could report your curlew sightings. So we're hoping to have a facility on our website soon to report your curlews. But in the meantime, the Northern Upland Chain Local Nature Partnership, that's a partnership of lots of different organisations working together in that Northern Upland Chain area, and that sort of Pennine chain in Northern England. And what they've usefully done is to put a facility on their website to report your first curlew sighting. So the first time you hear that lovely call of the curlew in the springtime, you can go on that website and tell us where you'd seen or heard it. So this first map then is the 31st of January, so a little bit early maybe, but there are 3 curlew sightings there already. And then this is just from a few days ago at the end of February, so filling up nicely with all those curlews coming back to breed. And then finally, if for the more creative amongst you, you could knit a curlew hat. So a very nice lady in Shetland designed our curlew hat. You can download the free pattern from the Curlew Life website. And then once you've finished it, you could take yourself a selfie of it and then be added to our curlew hat gallery by dropping us a line through Twitter or through our email address. And then do take a look at the Curlew Life website. We're developing it all the time. There's information about each of our project sites, about what we're up to, and ways to get involved as well. So that's it from me. Thank you very much for listening. I'll stop sharing now.
Thank you very much all for that very insightful and interesting talk about curlew ecology and the work that goes into these projects. Yeah, thank you very much, and sorry to everybody for any technical issues we're having. This talk it's being recorded and it'll be put online, so you'll be able to catch up in the next few days, and YouTube will generate the captions on that as well. So apologies, bear with us. I think it's a 10-man team job, not a 2. But yeah, thank you very much for that fascinating, insightful talk. Myself and Christina went out into the field the other day, and we met with farmer Willie Weatherston, and we shot this little film to explore why he wants to conserve the curlew on Hadrian's Wall. So it's just a short 1-minute film, and then afterwards we're going to have a bit of a discussion. So if you've got your questions, please get them in now. You can either put them in the YouTube chat, on the Facebook, or send us an email to info@wildintrigue.co.uk and we'll get them asked. But yeah, this is Willie Weatherston from Hadrian's Wall.
I'm Willie Weatherston. I've had Edgersgreen Farm, Haltersville, up on Hadrian's Wall. I've lived here all my life, and my family's been here for 100 years. A lot of the people that come here walking, they say it's the loveliest part in the country. They said it's just a pleasure to be here. We're farming about 1,000 black-faced ewes and 300 textile ewes, breeding prime lambs and breeding sheep as well. And we have about 70 suckler cows, breeding Limousin calves and Belgian blues. And you know, we look after these curlews. They come every year, and we've been topping ground where they've been nesting on, but it's always out of the breeding season. Well, we don't use any sprays, except a little bit for weed wiping for this year, but we haven't used any for 10, 15 years. And I think it's just a natural habitat. The birds can rear, and you know, they've got the bare ground to run on and the rougher ground to hide in and nest on. When you hear the curlew, it's just a sound that you love to hear every year. But the curlews and the lapwings, it's just great to see them, and the curlew's tone is fantastic. I just like to look after the countryside. It's great to see the wildlife here. A lot of people condemn the farmers for chasing them away, and we've still got lapwings, skylarks, curlews, golden green plovers, you know, all the birds are still here. Skylarks is just one part of the farm is covered with them. Well, I mean, if you're walking through the fields and you want to see the birds, I mean, keep your dog on a lead and keep quiet, and you'll see the birds. They're just there naturally. We see them every day, and they'll see them just the same. A pleasure to them. Because when you hear that sound when you're out lambing, it's fantastic.
So it was great to meet Willie and hear about his passion for the curlews. Now, it was a bit of a wet day when we were there, but a few days later we did hear curlews back in the area. So hopefully Willie will have a few pair on his land after all the project work this season. Now we've got time for discussion between the staff members with us today. So we're just going to throw them up on the screen so everybody can see. We've got a few questions coming in already. I'll just have a quick check there. But I've got one to kick you off, and it's, what's been your favourite encounter in the field? Because all of you spend a lot of time looking at curlew in the field and in the uplands, and what's been your favourite encounter?
Okay, well, I don't know if I've got a favourite curlew encounter, to be honest with you, but there was a day last breeding season. I was on a farm on Hadrian's Wall, and there were at least 3 pairs of curlew, all with their chicks, all calling in a hay meadow. The sun was shining, and it was so lovely to hear them. Curlews make a very particular sound when they have their chicks, and it was just so lovely to know that we'd been watching them all breeding season and they were still there with their chicks looking after them. So that was a lovely moment.
Sounds beautiful. Hilary, got a favourite moment?
Yeah, so I had to think about this, and I think one of my favourite times was actually during the first lockdown, and everybody was going on their 30-minute walk every day, and my walk took me to a local hay meadow just outside the village, and I went nearly every day, and I got to watch a pair of curlew fledge 1 chick. So that was lovely, just to have the time to actually sit and watch them, and then watch them successfully raise a chick. That's probably in my top experiences with curlew.
I would love to be able to walk to a curlew nest. That sounds absolutely amazing. Philip, have you got a highlight?
Yeah, I think it's working with farmers, and perhaps some of the habitat hasn't been as good as what it perhaps could be, and getting it back into a good area, getting the rush back under control, and then coming back the following breeding season and last spring and curlew, where they've perhaps been missing for a year or two and gone looking elsewhere for better habitat, and seeing them returning and seeing how happy the farmers are to see them returning. It's a great feeling. And then for them to go on and rear chicks as well. Yeah, just a fantastic feeling.
Yeah, it must be so amazing when you put all this hard work into conservation work and build the relationships with the farmers, and the farmers get invested to actually see the rewards of curlews fledgling from the land. So I'll have a peek at what questions we've got. So we've got a question from Roger here on YouTube, and he says, the project finishes in 2024. This seems to be too soon to expect any improvement in curlew numbers. The emphasis is on monitoring, doesn't seem enough.
Okay. Yes, it's not a huge amount of time. Obviously, these things do take time. Our project ends at the end of 2024, but hopefully the work doesn't end there. So part of our project is very much looking at what happens after the project has ended. So we have a deal of work to do to put together what we're calling an afterlife project or an afterlife plan, which means that we ensure that the work that we're doing gets carried on into the future. So that might be by the engaged farmers and the local community through volunteering and engagement, sort of take that work forward. And we're very much looking at implementing that, because we understand that work can't just stop there, it has to continue.
Brilliant, thanks Christina. We've got a question from Lee Watson here. Says, great info, thank you. All the farming had shown was permanent pasture. How do the panel think we can change the picture for those curlew nesting in intensively managed meadows where multiple silage cuts are taken from April, May right through the summer?
Do you want me to take that one?
Yeah.
We're starting to work with quite a lot of farmers that are under pressure to grow grass for silage, but understand the issues it raises with curlew. So we're starting to work with them to leave corners of the fields where they are nesting and mow around them, leaving a good patch of grass, and hopefully shouldn't disturb them, instead of mowing and destroying the eggs of the nest. By giving them that space, it allows them to rear the chicks. And but yeah, it's working with the ground and giving that advice to the farmers on how much area to leave and how to mow around it and avoid the damage to the breeding birds.
Great, thanks, Philip. There's one here from Alan Tilmouth on Facebook, and he says, has leaving the EU changed the available funding for farmers to conserve the curlew? Anybody wants to?
I don't know a detailed answer to that one, really. Yes, in many ways it has, yes, changed the availability, unfortunately. And through the new agricultural policy with the that's recently been passed, there is funding available for farmers in agri-environment schemes. So the current scheme is countryside stewardship, and there's a new scheme coming out at the moment and going to be rolled out over the next few years called environmental land management. So there will be funding available for farmers to do curlew conservation. But ultimately, yes, leaving the EU has had an impact.
Great, thanks, Hilary. And there's one last question about, in terms of control of predators, that was mentioned in the talk, and I don't know if you wanted to say a few more words about predators within the curlew's realm of breeding.
Yeah, so as we discussed, predation of particularly of eggs and chicks is a major cause of poor breeding success. So we're very much looking at why there, for example, why there might be the numbers of generous predators in a landscape that there are. We recognise that predator control might be a conservation tool that we might use, but we see it very much as a short-term, last resort type of conservation action. We're very focused on getting the habitat right, but we understand that there might be a need for short-term measures such as predator control in the meantime. It's kind of an emergency action But understanding sort of why there are the numbers of predators there are in their landscape, you know, is that a factor of changes in land management, for example? So this is work that's ongoing.
Thanks, Christina. And I think that's all the questions for the second. But if people want to do sort of one thing to help curlews today, what can they do? Have you got any suggestions?
Well, I mean, we did list a few there of a variety of different things that people could do. I think a really good one is to be interested and spread the word. That would be one. And if I could have another one, it would be about when you're out in the countryside, really enjoy the curlews, take pleasure in them, but try and look after them by keeping your distance and keeping your dog on a lead, I think. And I don't know if Hilary or Philip would have anything else to say about that.
Yeah, I would add, if you have the opportunity to advocate for curlew and other waders, then you can take it. So as Christina said, be interested and notice what might be breeding on the land around your town, or, you know, where you go for walks. And if you have the chance to engage with the farming community, then it's a fantastic way to, for one thing, speak to people about what it's like farming in the countryside, as well as maybe alert them to the presence of birds breeding on their land that they may not know about. And then the farmers can take really tangible actions, like they could put up a sign encouraging folks to be responsible when they may walk through that field on a public footpath, or they might even be able to delay mowing by a couple of weeks until the curlew chicks have hatched. That's what happened with me during lockdown. I won't say pestered, I engaged in a friendly fashion with the local farmers and just let them know that this was going on. And they were very happy to just delay things by a couple of weeks. And it meant that those birds were able to successfully fledge their chicks. And I'd really encourage people to do that if they have the opportunity.
Thank you.
The bit I would say is citizen science, really. If you can report your sightings to the Upland Northern Chain and any other surveys, it's hugely important, the data. It means people are out far and wider than we can be and cover a lot of area. So them sightings are really important and give us a really useful data set of where birds are in, where they're breeding, that sort of information.
Brilliant. There's been another question pop in there. Thank you all. Curlew Action have some posters about keeping dogs on lead, sticking to footpaths, etc. during the breeding season that you can download. Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff around dogs on leads, and Willie the farmer who actually filmed had some recent articles in the press about keeping dogs on leads. But no, thank you for all those contributions. So there's quite a few things people can get involved with there, and being curlew champion, maybe walking around with your own curlew knitwear hat to get involved with. And there's been a comment on Facebook about a local artist as well who's keen to get involved with you lot about curlews. So we'll make sure to pass on the details. But thank you very much for leading that talk tonight. It's been fascinating and your time to discuss curlews with the folk. As I say, this recording will be put on YouTube afterwards, so you'll be able to watch back with this. But thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
In such a stunning area. Imagine the species of all our uplands had them. But yeah, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Now we've got a short survey which would be really appreciated if you could fill in. So Heather's just dropped that in the Facebook as well as the YouTube chat, and we'll send it as well through the Eventbrite page. So there will be a recording of this talk available, and we'll send that out through Eventbrite, and it'll also go onto a YouTube channel. So yeah, thank you again for coming tonight. This talk tonight's been made possible from the Green Recovery Challenge Fund, as Christina had mentioned earlier. So gal there, listen out for your curlews, make sure to knit your curlew hat and become a curlew champion. Thank you very much for coming tonight. See you later. Bye.